What's going on, everybody? So, you know, naturally I got to do like a spoiler discussion of Civil War, but I wanted to do something a little bit different because, anywhere you can search online, there's going to be a ton of spoiler reviews and everybody's talking about it. What I really wanted to do actually was I wanted to address some of the criticisms that I'm hearing about the movie from either some critics that are just idiots or a lot of it stems from just misunderstanding of the movie and certain things in the MCU. So let's take them one by one. So there's some criticisms that are subjective, like, you don't like Aunt May because she's too young. That's a common one. That's subjective. I mean, that it is what it is. I mean, personally, I liked it. I like the idea of doing something different, and I love Marissa Tomei no matter what she does, so I'm all for it. And this Spider-Man is especially young, so that's subjective. So I'll give you that one. Now, IGN, who really take them seriously when it comes to like movie reviews, but their critic actually said that they didn't like the fact that Tony was not the Tony that we know, and he was more like somber and morose and serious throughout the movie. And I heard that and I just flipped out because I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, that's coming from somebody who either has not seen all the movies or is not paying attention, or you just forgot about what's been happening in the timeline all along, right? So there's no reason for Tony to be bright and chipper like we know him from the first movie. Ever since the first Iron Man, everything he's done has blown up in his face. Every time he thinks he knows what's going on, or he thinks he has a handle on the situation and his way works, it always proves that it doesn't work, right? So even from the first movie, he's the head of Stark Industries and he's a weapons developer and he thinks he's got everything figured out. Blows up in his face, literally, when the missile blows up, and then he realizes, the world isn't quite what he thought it was, and then, he decides to take responsibility for what he's been doing, makes the Iron Man suit, so now he's trying to, right his wrongs, right? And then in Iron Man 2, it's addressed, the government telling him he can't operate outside the law, he still stands by it, he goes through some trouble there, and then, he's been an outlaw since basically the first movie, and then he single-handedly creates Ultron. He's the reason why Avengers 2 even happened. In Iron Man 3, he openly challenged Mandarin or, the actor, whatever. And then that literally blew up in his face again, and then they attack his home, and then the whole thing with Pepper, and, nothing he's done has worked, and he's fatigued by it. And even in the beginning of this movie, you can tell, like, he's just tired, he doesn't know what to do. And then after Avengers, the whole alien thing, he realizes again how insignificant he really is in the grand scheme of things. So of course he's tired, and of course he's not going to be his regular jokey self. Do you expect him to be cracking jokes while him and Cap are punching each other? Like, come on, really? So, people are like, it's really uncharacteristic of him to want to sign. Like, no, it makes perfect sense for him to want to sign. They've been setting this up since the first movie. Especially the fact that him and Cap have been at odds since they met each other. I mean, they actually, in Avengers, they were fighting each other back and forth. They've always been arguing, so it writes itself. I mean, it's always been set up. And the MCU treats us like adults. Like, they're basically turning moviegoers into, like, comic fans, or so to speak. Like, because in comic books, you're expected to know what happened in the story before the next issue. They're not going to keep telling you the backstory. Like, you got to know the continuity. So you're expected to know what's happening in the MCU before even seeing this movie. And then on the flip side, you got Cap. So people are like, oh, Cap's always been lawful. Why is he acting like an outlaw? Well, let's look at his history, right? He's been a soldier following orders since day one. And time again, it's proven that he's just being used and he's not getting told the whole story. And how many times has Fury hid things from him? In Winter Soldier, he goes on that mission on the boat and then it turns out to be something totally different. And then, Black Widow's got another mission, and he's just being used. And then at the end of the day, everything he believed in with S.H.I.E.L.D. ends up to not be what he thought it was. And it's the whole Hydra thing. And, like, time and time again, he's been following orders and it blows up in his face, and it's not working for him. And he realizes, he's just a soldier, and in the grand scheme of things, again, that he's insignificant, So, of course, at this point, it's like, why would he want to go back to doing that? And he even says it. He's like, people in charge always have agendas, and agendas change. Makes perfect sense, You just got to really know what's happening with these characters, and you have to understand where they're coming from and everything that's happened in the timeline, and then everything just makes sense. The setup was perfect. Like, this was bound to happen anyway. And then the other criticism is people are saying is the villain, And this is my take on it, but basically they are purposely not going with the formula, and that's what I meant before when I said like this movie breaks the mold of the comic book formula. So, and they even kind of tease us and give us a plot twist, So everybody was like, "Oh, he's just a jobber villain or whatever. He was unnecessary. He was just a guy. Like that's the whole point. He's just a guy, you know." The pieces were in place for this to already happen. He just basically set up the spark. He just had to let it happen and walk away, and that's what happened because nobody actually caught him except for Black Panther at the end. He basically laid the foundation, and people actually are kind of misunderstanding what he did also, which that may warrant a second viewing, but I understood. Like people think that he was controlling Winter Soldier during the first part of the movie. He wasn't. That was just a setup. Winter Soldier was never even behind that stuff. He didn't activate him again until he captured him, or he was captured and they were interviewing him. So people, I think, kind of missed pieces of the plot, which, that just warrants a second viewing. But back to what I was saying, if your complaint is that the villain was underwhelming, what did you expect to happen, right? Did you want them to go to that final fortress place and then fight all these other Winter Soldiers and then just have it be a boss battle and then be just like Batman vs Superman, which again I'm not trying to knock that movie, but I mean if that's what you wanted, then you were just gonna get exactly what you got in Batman vs Superman. Instead of them teaming up to fight Doomsday, they're fighting these powered soldiers, and then it just becomes another stereotypical movie, and it's like whatever. Like no, like they purposely went out of their way to give you that twist. And when I was watching the movie at that point, and I was like, all right, here we go. Now they teamed up. They're gonna fight these guys, whatever. All right, here we go. And then no, it actually was totally not what I wanted. Well, not what I wanted, but not what I expected, and gave me something I didn't know I wanted. So before the whole fight that they were having was about signing and the whole registration act and everything, right? And then they finally realized that all right, we need to form a truce because there's a bigger threat out there, right? Which was the whole setup, right? So that was the point of him bringing them there for that moment, so that way he gets them together, and then he shows them the last reveal. So they were already very tense because of the whole registration thing, and then when he showed them that video, that was the final spark, and it was no longer about registration. It was no longer about taking sides for or against the government. It was personal. None of that stuff mattered anymore. It was just totally personal. It was just this is my friend, this is my best friend. I'm gonna defend him versus this guy killed my mom, and it was just pure emotion at that point. There was nothing happening there. There was no planning behind it. There was no sense. There was no discussion. It was just pure emotion on both sides, and that's why that fight was so much more intense, and that's why there was so much emotional payoff in that fight versus the airport fight, which was more of like that was fanfare. Like it was an awesome fight, but honestly, if you took that whole airport scene out of the movie, it was still a movie that holds up even without it. That was just there to make us all happy and give us something for the fans of the comics and for kids, and it was good. It paid off. It all fit together. But that one was more lighthearted because none of those people wanted to hurt each other. They were there to stop each other, but nobody wanted to hurt each other. That's why they were, pulling punches and able to joke here and there and whatever. That last fight scene was pure emotion, rage, sadness. Like that was just a clash of just ridiculous proportions, and it was set up perfectly. And that was the whole point of that dude. Like he, Zemo. People, comic fans are mad because like, oh, he wasn't Baron Zemo. He didn't have the mask. Like, you should have learned to accept at this point that they're gonna take liberties with the villains because, they have to do something different. And that's something the Russos have been good at, is they're breaking the mold on the stereotypical formula. Winter Soldier was a different formula from the regular comic movie where it's just, all right, now we fight the end boss. Like, it was very personal, and this movie was even more personal. So I like what they're doing, and I like what they did with Zemo. So again, I ask you, if you are disappointed with Zemo, what did you want to happen? Did you want them to just kiss, make up, and fight some end boss that was going to be underwhelming and then movie's over? Like, no, this was way better. And you could say that he didn't need to be there, but it made sense for him to have that reveal, since Cap was hiding it from Tony all this time, and that was like the last piece of the puzzle. So, I mean, you got to ask yourself, what would have been the better alternative, I think that's mostly it. I mean, there's not really many other criticisms. Anything else is subjective. Like just, I wanted more of this guy, less of this guy, or more Spidey. But, Spidey was kind of written in late in the movie, so they made it fit. But obviously, he wasn't getting a lot of screen time. Other than that, anybody who's going into this not knowing all the movies, I mean, that's really on you. I mean, it's expected of you to know the history and know everything before seeing these movies, So they're not going to hold your hand, man. You got to put the stuff together yourself. But all in all, yeah, that was just something I wanted to address. So let me know what you guys think, and I'm probably gonna see it again soon. That was a fantastic movie. And then as far as DC fanboys, I can't even, you made up your minds, whatever, that's not an argument that's worth having. I'm tired of this whole like, ever since BBS, it's like you can't like this anymore. You're not allowed to like Marvel unless you like DC or vice versa. Like I like both. I don't want DC to fail. It's just BBS was not my thing. I thought it sucked. Does it mean I hate DC? No, I still love Marvel, and I hope DC does well. And I'm looking forward to Batfleck taking over things now. So we'll see. Anyway, once again, let me know what you think. Take care, guys.